So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged, and as promised, this is going to be the first that I will have shown anyway of the patch 0.97, and this is obviously still a sort of work in progress as it were, but this one is also going to be on a new map that is going to be new for 0.97, and I believe this one was made with the upcoming tournament in mind, although by the time this is posted I think the tournament will already be underway, at least if the schedule holds. So yeah, this is obviously, you can see there is a small village here in the middle, and around the outside we have sort of this more sort of denser scrubland with a few more little settlements sort of dotting the area. This is a rather interesting building. This is an Aztec one from Medieval 2. Regardless, we have obviously a very varied map, which is good because I feel as though the flat fields, while they are sort of the best metric for sort of seeing how armies perform against one another, it can get dreadfully stale sometimes just to see the same maps over and over again, so it's good to see some new ones. And this one was sent to me by, as I overshoot his army, J-Monster, and I believe he's the one who made this map. He's the one who's made all of the ones for the tournament, I believe. Again, that's what I think is the case, I could be wrong there, but he's going to be playing as Rune, and I don't believe Rune have got any all-new units, but obviously they will be subject to all of the tweaks that have happened in the patch. And he's got some Narim. The Narim have always been, previously, the slightly more offensive sort of mainline runic archer that they could bring. The Variag mercenaries have always been, particularly in the last patch, where sort of quantity and survivability in the skirmish fight was all important. The Variag mercenaries were brought 9 times out of 10. You very rarely saw the Narim, so I'd be interested to see how they perform now. And then just in behind we have the classic runic frontline, a combination of the Loka Gamperim and the Loka Flagrim, so obviously a lot of AP here from the halberds and the mace infantry. And honestly, this is one of Rune's main strengths. You know, they may lack a little bit when it comes to comparing them to someone like Umbar, for example. The Castamir's Legion overall have got higher stats than the Flagrim, but more AP here, and it's going to be a real problem for armoured factions, in particular factions that rely on their armour. You know, Rune are going to be very good at dealing with that sort of thing, as they always have been, to be fair. Just in behind them we've got some Eastron warriors as well, which are the dual-wielding variant of the lower tier runic infantry. Historically, the clansmen have been a very safe bet. They've been one of the strongest militia units, just because, you know, they're probably the strongest in combat out of all of the militia units just in general, because they don't have spears, so they don't suffer that malice. The Eastron warriors, however, lack a shield, so they can be a little bit more risky. They're not very good at obviously absorbing arrow fire, but in melee they will last considerably longer. Dual wielding units have got higher skill on average, and he has brought quite a few Eastron warriors by the looks of things. Rune, I can't imagine, are too at home in the very wintry conditions that they find themselves in. And then just in behind there we can see he's got some Baltroth tribesmen, so some basic javelins. Javelins have retained their AP, axe throwers have not. I believe axe throwers now have got higher base damage but are not armor piercing, so that is significant for any axe thrower units in particular. Stuff like the Eowyn's Shield Maidens or the Ironfoot axe throwers will behave a little differently, but the Baltroth tribesmen should still mostly fulfill the same function that they did in the last patch. And then just in behind them some Eastron Guard, which I believe classify as two-handed spears, so they do have the anti-cavalry bonus, and spears against cavalry will be significantly stronger now. They've always been a bit of a glass jaw unit though, the Eastron Guard. They tend to fall over pretty quickly, so you need to look after them. You can't obviously let them stray into range fire, otherwise they will fall apart relatively quickly. You didn't see them an awful lot in the past, so I'll be interested to see how they perform here. And then over here we can see a new and improved model here for the Eastron clan chiefs. They are now golden, just like their brethren, and spear cavalry, so they have a bonus against other cavalry, and this is going to be Rune's primary method of going into cav-to-cav engagements, because obviously the Carmel's Dragon Knights can't do it all. They are only limited in number after all. And then we have the Dragon's Wrath Warlords over here as well, multiple HP Lancers, a little bit heavier than most, so they're a little bit more focused around their survivability than something like the Black Serpent Bodyguard, for example, which are much more speedy around the field. But obviously the Dragon's Wrath Warlord's still very, very dangerous on the charge, and obviously that multiple HP gives them a little bit more margin for error than other units like the Inas Rim, for example. And then as we go over here, the final part of J-Monster's army is going to be more cavalry. Of course, we start off with the Carmel's Dragon Knights, which, of course, knights, very, very dangerous indeed. Historically, they've been some of the tankiest knights around. Only the Knights of Innuminas in the last patch were stronger than them, or at least, well, more survivable than them, shall we say, because obviously all knights are very, very deadly, and obviously the Carmel's Dragon Knight's no different. Carmel himself riding with them, and then of course we have another unit of E-Strong Clan Chiefs, so that's going to round out J-Monster's army. Let's look at his ally, and it's going to be somewhat lore-friendly, as we have Sin of the Dark Cloud, who is going to be playing as Harad, so the evil men banding together. And just like in the last patch, we can see quite a lot of Haradrim Spearmen out here. Obviously in terms of overall quality, not the best, but you know, they are spears, so I would be interested to see how spears interact with cavalry, and we might very well see that in this fight in particular. But obviously, you know, as far as militia spears go, then not too impressive, to be honest with you. They are only a tiny baby step above stuff like the Orc Fodder. But they do offer you a lot of numbers, and they are cheap, so this allows you to spend money elsewhere as Harad. Speaking of which, we have the Muhad Beast Hunters, which, similar to the Baltroth Tribesmen, of course, have got those javelins which they will throw and deal some nice armor-piercing damage. But as far as javelins go, it's hard to get better than the Demons of the Desert, who historically have been extremely devastating. I would expect no different from them here. Obviously they do double as two-handed spears in melee as well. Pretty damn strong in melee overall, at least they have been previously, and I imagine this is going to be no different here. We'll see how well they can perform. And as I'm sure you've already seen, the Champions of Nafrat, obviously an incredibly strong multiple HP shock unit, you know, much more focused around dealing that damage, so we'll see how well they can do depending on who they have decided to commit their forces against. And over here I would imagine we're going to see some cavalry, indeed we will. We have the Serpent Guard here at the front, which of course are mainstay ever since vanilla, fast moving. They're not multiple HP, but they will still be able to do some nice damage off the charge with their lances, obviously with their armor piercing. And that is going to be just about it for them. We've also got the Muhad War Beasts, which have actually been in the game for some time, but generally speaking have not been used all that much, because they can be, you know, they were very difficult to use correctly in the last patch, I would say, especially seeing as they were very expensive. But we'll see how the War Beasts get on this time. And of course we have some Mumakil as well, and I think that's just about it. We might actually have a unit of hidden cavalry over here somewhere as well. But of course Harad do have hidden units like the Hashari that they can bring, which likely to see them as well, to be honest with you. So that's going to do it for the blue team. Let's move on to the first. Less of a team, to be honest with you. We have Creed playing as Gondor, who's all on his lonesome, unfortunately for him. We have a slightly upgraded model as well for the Nimlothian Honor Guard. Of course, previously they were called the Shielded Fountain Guard, so this is their new look, and I have to say I am liking it a lot. Nimlothian Honor Guard, of course, you know, for the most part in the last patch was certainly the elite Gondorian unit you would want, because they were slightly cheaper and they were armor piercing, and you know, just generally had all of the plus points of spearmen as well. And obviously Gondor in general with their armor piercing spears were very strong in the last patch, and I imagine Gondor have benefited greatly from the buffs to spears. We got the Sentinels of Hirluin, who of course previously were the Pinith Galen Cavalry, so this is going to be Gondor's Lancers with their partisan spears here. Again, you know, Gondor's cavalry is serviceable, I would say. It's certainly not the main focus of their roster, but a unit like this can obviously do quite a lot of damage, particularly in a map like this where it can be difficult to keep track of everything. They could get a sneaky charge off at just the right time. Gondor have also got some nice terrain features here that they can make use of. At the front here we've got the Forebears of Valacerca. Interesting, but obviously they've renamed the Guards of Osgiliath, so again, just a pike unit. And overall their quality is good, but you can't bring them in as higher quantities as other factions might, but we can see that he has brought the two that he is afforded. We've got the Marines of Pelagia, obviously, javelins, so once again, very, very similar to the Muhad Beast Hunters and Baltroth Tribesmen we've already seen. We can see the Gondor infantry over here with the armor upgrade. They've been given a little bit of a makeover as well. I feel as though they're a little bit higher in terms of their detail and their graphical fidelity, which is always good to see. And with obviously all of their armor upgrades as well, they can be a pretty nice holding force on the front line. As far as the sort of standard human infantry goes, with their 2 levels of armor upgrades, there's a very real case for saying that they are the strongest in that regard. Obviously you do pay a little more when you upgrade their armor 2 levels. There's 2 more units of them over here, and there's also some Gondorian archers over here again. Looks like they've been upgraded as well. So Gondor in general obviously very good at the more attrition based warfare, both at range and in melee, with their upgraded archers over here. We've also got more cavalry over on this wing. This is just the standard Gondorian cavalry, which is spear cav, of course. They do not have a shield, but as far as cav to cav engagements go, this is really the only option Gondor have that is efficient to use. But obviously, you know, once upon a time they had nothing, so this is definitely a step up from those days. We've got some guards of the Citadel through here as I push my way through the trees. Obviously previously the Citadel Guard, they were the AP spears. And AP was really the only way you could make spears not fodder units in the last patch. With the changes, however, you would imagine that something like the Guard of the Citadel would be very effective in the upcoming patch. We shall see. And we've got some Marines of Palagear up here, and then right at the back we've got the Veterans of Osgiliath, which, they look pretty much the same, obviously. They double as pretty effective line infantry, as well as being nice and effective at range. So that's going to pretty much round out Creed's army. He may very well have some hidden units here and there as well, with the Rangers of Athelion and the remnants of Minas Ithil in here somewhere as well. But Creed is on his own, so he certainly has the right to stay in this hilly section if he so chooses. Meanwhile, just over here, we can see that Engsvitz is going to be playing as the Realm of Linden. Obviously in the last patch Linden were incredibly easy to play as. I would imagine they're still probably more forgiving than the other Elven factions, purely because of all their hybrid units, but we'll see how they get on, considering they're pointed at Gondor, who are in a very defensive position indeed. The 4 Linden archers are here at the front, and obviously in terms of damage, as you would expect from elves, they are going to be pretty effective. But in terms of a skirmish fight, I would not well, you would imagine that the Gondor archers would have the better of it. They have the elevated ground, they have the armour. Just in general, they're more geared towards a sort of elongated skirmish fight, whereas the 4 Linden archers certainly are not. But the Elven skill and numbers here might certainly help them, because they are also backed up with some Harlinden Guard, obviously archer, spear, hybrids, and obviously they do have a slight shield value, which helps them a little bit in a skirmish fight, but obviously it's that Elven skill at range which is going to be the most important thing here. He spread his army pretty wide. We can see some 4 Linden Marines, which of course spear, javelin hybrids. They're going to be excellent at zoning out cavalry, you would imagine. Well, you would imagine they were in the last patch, and with all the changes I can only imagine that has only increased. Obviously going to be a very key part of a lot of Linden armies, particularly on an open field, because this is going to be one way to sort of protect your more limited infantry force, protecting those limited elven numbers. Meanwhile over here we can see some Harlinden infantry and 4 Linden pikemen, or 4 Linden long spears as they're now called, I should say. Obviously the classic Linden front line, the Harlinden infantry, obviously that skilled elven infantry, very difficult to match up one-to-one against. If you're just sending up basic line infantry of your own there, you kind of need to try and outperform them. And when they're backed up with the pikes, this is only made even more difficult for your opponent. Some more 4 Linden Marines just in behind them. The rest of the Linden army is going to be over here. There's more Harlinden infantry, there's more 4 Linden long spears. Another unit of Harlinden infantry, we have the Mithlond Marines, which of course are javelin line infantry hybrids. So again, they're not quite as strong as line infantry as the Harlinden infantry are, but they obviously have the javelins that they can use first, which more than makes up for that. And then just in behind we can see the mighty Horse Lords of Ulmo. Previously, of course, the Noldorin Horse Lords, the Linden Knights. They lack a shield, they don't have as higher armour values as a lot of their other sort of knight brethren, as it were. But in terms of their speed and in terms of their abilities in sustained melee with that elven skill, you don't want to hang around too long when they pull out their two-handed blades. And then finally we have a couple of units of cavalry over here, some Lancers of... I'll just get a good look at them. The Lancers of Uinin, which are of course the Javelin Lance Cavalry hybrids. And then over here I would imagine we have the Bow Cavalry, Spear Cavalry hybrids, which are the Escort of Siratur. Again, I'm sure that I'm pronouncing all of these wrong. Again, I said that they had sort of removed some of the difficult to pronounce Elven names, which they have. Maethir, Lasgallen are gone, and the Inner Council are now what they're called, but it seems as though they've made Linden a little bit more difficult to pronounce. Yay. Meanwhile, the final army on the field today, we have Starling. He's going to be playing as Dole Amroth. I'm glad to see Dole Amroth, because they should have brought some of their new stuff, I would imagine. The Dor and Ernil archers are not new, of course, but they are, of course, just sort of basic human line archers, similar to stuff like the Arthedain Marksmen or the Gondor archers. They do not have any armour upgrades, though, so very much the bog standard approach for his skirmish line here. And then back here we will see one of the more classic approaches to Dole Amroth's front line, a combination of Ethelond men-at-arms and halberdiers. So obviously the halberdiers provide the armour piercing, the men-at-arms provide sort of the holding abilities that most line infantry will. This is pretty good combination here, but as we saw in the last match, this is not going to be enough for Dole Amroth all on its lonesome. They're going to need some backup, and they will get it in the shape of the Black Swan Renegades. So obviously this is a more expensive line infantry unit that also adds armour piercing. In terms of overall effectiveness and stats, they are stronger than the Flagrim, but they are more expensive and you cannot bring them in as greater numbers. Over here we can see the Knights of the Silver Swan, the dedicated Lancers of Dole Amroth, and I have to say they look they look pretty at home in these snowy environments. I know that Dole Amroth is not really located in an area that would see much snow, but no, they wear it well. Knights of the Silver Swan, obviously very, very effective lances. I believe their charge bonus is 15, which means it's not the full 20, but Dole Amroth can look elsewhere for that now. Meanwhile, we do have the Peridil Horse Guard, which are the sort of the melee cavalry which has replaced the mercenaries. You know, they are stronger than the Merc cavalry, but they are also, of course, more expensive as a result. And then over here we have Imrahil, who's going to be in the Haven Knights. So obviously the Haven Knights were pretty much the mainstay of Dole Amroth in the last patch. They are the melee knights. They are still the kings of melee cav combat for Dole Amroth, and that is one of their main focuses. So I would expect to see the Haven Knights a fair amount still. And in terms of the cavalry presence, you would have to say that this team over here of Linden and Dole Amroth certainly has a pretty scary force indeed. But without further ado, let's begin. So I'd be very interested to see how some of these new units from Dole Amroth get on. The Peridil Horse Guard. Well, actually that's the only new unit they brought, but in general I'd be interested to see how Dole Amroth performs, because they were a little bit underwhelming in the previous patch. We've got Gondor over there as well, and looks like Linden are going to be moving slowly towards the Gondorian section of the field, and Gondor should, you know, certainly from a cavalry perspective, Gondor can't really afford to be too aggressive, because Linden's cavalry, especially if they're backed up by Dole Amroth, will rip them to pieces. But if they do remain more defensive, Gondor can certainly hold out longer than most. Certainly from an attritional point of view, they could do some pretty nice damage, although the AP values on stuff like the Guard of the Citadel will not be too useful against Linden, it must be said. So they're going to have to rely on their skirmish power to try and hold Linden at bay. Meanwhile, it looks as though Gondor's woes are going to continue, because Harad and Rune are heading this way, so Gondor is going to be sort of sandwiched between both of the other two teams. It might be worth Gondor's time actually maybe sort of trying to sort of shift back a little bit, although there's not really much further that you can retreat, especially with that body of water getting in the way somewhat. But I do like this map. There's a lot of variation here. There's a lot of sort of wilderness terrain. There's also the urban areas in the middle, which actually it looks as though all of the factions so far are ignoring, which is interesting. Linden slowly moving forwards. Actually a little bit concerned as to what, I was going to say, you know, the General's bodyguard unit here, the Nimlothian Honour Guard, are hightailing it away from this area, because they would have been utterly overwhelmed by the onrushing Harad forces from Sin of the Dark Cloud. But yeah, Gondor certainly have the most defensive position here, but there's no way they're going to be able to withstand an attack from both angles from both other teams. They simply don't have the manpower to do that. And you can see over here the escort moving across, and this is the bow cavalry unit. And because they double as spear cav, Gondor might not want to be in such a hurry to rush out to meet them. Instead, Gondor would be much better served, I think, just allowing their foot archers to zone them out. In fact, I think that's going to be kind of their only option here. And you can see over here that the Gondor cavalry is sort of moving over here. This is a bold move, I would say, by Creed, especially considering that they don't have shields, and the fact that even if they do get into melee, both of those two units of spear cavalry, and the elves, you would imagine, would probably have the slight edge. The Gondor cavalry is going to retreat. They will lose a couple of unit models for their over-eagerness to charge in there, however. A couple of units of Gondor cav they have, though. With two units, they'd obviously be able to easily overwhelm the escort, but I would highly doubt that Engspitz is going to be that careless with his unit of horse archers, and you can see here that the elven range coming into play. They have some pretty substantial range for a horse archer unit, that, and they're still able to harass these Gondor cavalrymen, which is going to prompt their retreat, and is also going to cause the Gondor archers to move across here to attempt to zone them out. Ooh, now that's an interesting little tidbit. As the Rangers of Athelion reveal themselves, or were revealed, I suppose, the escort managing to, by sheer chance, find Creed's hidden Rangers, which is very bad for Creed, because Rangers, the escort are just going to be able to charge in there and deal some pretty nice damage, but Gondor are now returning fire, so it might be time for Engspitz to just sort of cut his losses and get out of here, because this is only a single unit that he has over here, and it's very unlikely that he's going to be able to do too much more damage to the Rangers of Athelion, especially with the Gondor cavalry now also onrushing. The fact that they're getting fired at by the Gondor archers across the way might be time to cut your losses there. Meanwhile, the Sentinels of Hurlin are being chased down by the Hashari Shadows, and obviously the Hashari Shadows, mounted rangers, very, very dangerous potentially, with that body piercing, and Gondor already feeling the squeeze. Bit unfortunate for Creed here, being caught between these two much mightier armies. And obviously the Sentinels of Hurlin going to retreat from this fight. They could turn around and try and charge the Hashari Shadows, and they'd probably get there and do some decent damage as well. But it would also certainly lead to them losing this unit of Lancers, which Gondor can't really afford to lose too much. Veterans of Osgiliath are repositioning themselves. Again, it can be pretty difficult to keep track of things with all of this tree cover, but Gondor certainly, their skirmishers are going to be sort of their saving grace here. So the Rangers of Athelion are going to survive, 69 of them, so not too much of a problem in the end. Sentinels of Hurlin taking a couple of attritional losses, but nothing too significant either. So advancing through these trees, it looks like is going to be Harad's method of approach. Although I would imagine they're probably going to wait until they get the support from Rune, who are sort of dipping into the settlement a little bit, sending their cavalry out here to make sure they can't be flanked by any Linden or Dole Amroth treachery. Some spear cav and the multiple HP lance over here, so that's certainly not a low quality force. We can see Rune's army marching in formation. A lot of AP in this army as well, which from a Gondorian perspective is certainly a little bit concerning. You certainly don't want to see a lot of Gamprim and Flagrim colliding with your lines when it's mostly made up of Gondor infantry with the armour upgrades, because that is certainly a fight which from a cost perspective is going to go squarely in Rune's favour. I'm liking this sort of touched up Gondor infantry though, I must say. Of course, they do have the forebears over here as well. Forebearers, I should say. And as far as pikes go, pretty good quality. That's when the enemy skirmishers are coming in, so it's certainly a difficult situation for Creed, because he can't really move at this point. He's sort of posted himself up on this hill. Here are the Gondor archers, however, which are a little bit further forward than the rest of the army. Skirmishing with the elves. Harland infantry just in behind. The 4 Linden archers skirmishing. Again, be an interesting sort of battle this, whether the armour and the more skirmish battle focused approach of the Gondor archers will win through, or whether it's going to be the higher skill of the elves. There are also multiple units of 4 Linden archers which will probably tilt this fight. You can also see here the Harland and Guard are moving into position, so certainly putting the screws to Gondor here, because Linden are going to be able to outnumber the Gondorian skirmishers on this flank, because Gondor can't commit all of their archers over here, because that would be a green light for Harad and Rune to charge forward and attack very quickly. Poor Gondor just sort of marooned up on their hill over here. I think this unit of horse archers is still down here, and well, this is the Lancers as well, so the Linden cavalry sort of heading out here, as well as some of the Dole Amroth cav at that. Some Gondor cavalry waiting in the trees. The escort now charging forwards. Let's have a look here as the Gondor archers continuing in their quest to try and skirmish with the elves, but when you're outnumbered by the elves, you know that you're in for a bit of a rough time. And even an archer which is as designed for going into a skirmish fight like the Gondor archers, this is not likely to go too well for them. Although, to be fair, the Harland and Guard have spent most of their time moving into this position. Ooh, here come the escort of Siriatur. They are going to charge into the Gondor archers, but this could cost them their lives here, because the Gondor cavalry is going to surround them. And the Gondor cavalry is spear cav. Yeah, and the escort are routing. Was that worth it in the end? Because they didn't do crippling damage to the Gondor archers. And the Lancers are still over there. Yeah, probably not worth it in the end. Because I would have said that, you know, Linden would slowly but surely have started to win that fight anyway. And there are more Gondor archers further up the hill. Actually, this is just the same unit that's pulled back. But you don't really need to rush this against Gondor. They have less resources than you, especially if you start pushing up the Dole Amroth archers as well. Gondor skirmishers are in a pretty good position, but ultimately there is going to be a limit to what they can accomplish here. Especially if they have to worry about Harad's advance as well through the trees, which for the time being is just Haradrim's spearmen. Although there are the demons of the desert as well, the Muhad beast hunters. Harad's infantry is not the concern here, it's definitely their javelins and their skirmishers. Their cavalry is also going to be marauding around the field at some point, you would imagine. What have we here? The sentinels. Meeting up with the Gondor cavalry, just sort of getting into position, making sure that Dole Amroth and Linden can't try that sort of thing again. Meanwhile, here we go. I mean, this is going to be the initial engagement, you would imagine, although the Haradrim Spearmen are just going to stop a little bit short. But yeah, the Gondorian infantry line, especially when they're backed up by those pikes, is going to have absolutely no issues whatsoever at dealing with the Haradrim Spearmen. The problem, however, is going to be the Haradrim Javelins, which are also in close proximity. There are also the Champions of Nafarat, which are a bit of a fly in the ointment. The Gondor infantry will certainly not like fighting them, but whether they're here in enough numbers to cause Gondor enough trouble remains to be seen, as Harad moves onto the hill. Haradrim Spearmen also moving out here. The Demons of the Desert are in position, but unsurprisingly they are also attracting quite a lot of attention from the archers, as they fire into the forebearers of Vala Sirka. Vala Sirka. I preferred Guards of Osgiliath, if I'm being honest. However, defeat is almost a certainty. They've already taken some pretty substantial damage, but so have the Demons of the Desert, and that is not a small loss to take. What is going on over here? Kamal's Dragon Knights sort of marauding around this flank over here. Meanwhile, this is certainly not a cavalry engagement they want to take, however, because Dole Amroth are here in force, as well as the Linden Jav Cav. What is going on here? Linden slowly but surely edging their way forwards with the archers, also some Harland's infantry coming forward. You can imagine that at this point, if they're going to be attacked from both sides, Gondor simply won't have the resources to continue to hold from both sides. Meanwhile, we'll go down to half speed and getting closer to this fight over here. A combination of the Gondor infantry and the forebearers trying to hold back the Harad advance, which, considering it's mostly made up of Haradrim Spearmen, I would actually back them to do this. There are only so many champions of Nafarat, and while they may be very strong, you know, with the support of some of those Gondorian skirmishers, they should be okay. Gondor should be able to hold the line here, but the problem is they're going to be attacked from multiple angles. Meanwhile, these Muhard Beast Hunters actually in melee already. They do have maces as well, so I think the thing that sets them apart from stuff like the Baltrog Tribesmen is they do have some AP values in melee, which is certainly going to help matters. But they are having to fight uphill into the Gondor infantry. Still, is there going to be enough Gondorian presence over here to hold them back? Probably not, especially not with Dole Amroth moving forwards as well. A couple of units of Black Swan Renegades trying to use their AP, which much better used against Gondor, to be fair, than it will be against Harad. There's also these Rangers of Athelion, which are going to be doing some nice body-piercing damage to the Runic infantry on the approach as well. It looks like they're going for the Demons of the Desert, but as part of the bargain, their body-piercing will also allow them to hit the Flagrim and the Eastron Warriors, as the Flagrim continue to rush forth. I'd be interested to see what's going on with the cavalry. Looks like more cavalry is going to be swinging out wide. The Hashari Shadows getting into a position where they can also start using their body piercing right along the Gondorian line over here, which is going to be pretty devastating for them. The strength of the Gondorian line is really what's holding them together at the moment, and you would imagine that that is not going to hold true for very long. The Haradrim Spearmen are shaken, however, and it's worth saying that the body piercing could cause a little bit of friendly fire as the Gondor cavalry rushes down the hill. That was very loud. The Gondor cavalry rushing down the hill. They could get to the Hashari Shadows, but somehow I doubt it. Looks like they're not even going for that. They are going to instead try to charge Sin's Hashari, which have moved into a position to flank. Obviously the Hashari, not a lot of armour, but very, very skillful, an assassin unit. They are also going to be able to get into the Marines at Pelagir and to stop them from firing. And stopping that supply of javelin fire into their front line is going to be a pretty big win for Harad and Rune, provided they can sort of keep up the cost efficiency that they have at the moment. Meanwhile, these Sentinels of Hurluin are about to be intercepted by the Linden Lancers. The Javelins also coming in here as well. Let's see how the advance on this side is going. You can see the Guard of the Citadel are over here, but again, the problem is they're fighting Linden, so really their bonuses are not really coming into play too much, although they will against the Black Swan Renegades. But even here, the Black Swan Renegades with their AP are going to be a really nice foil for the Harland infantry as well, so good interplay here between Dole Amroth and Linden. Here come the Lancers, who are potentially going to charge in to the back of what remains of this unit of Gondor archers and break them. Again, I feel like Gondor were always going to be sold down the river in this fight, and eventually it's going to come down to a fight between the evil men and the factions with elven blood in their veins. And it'll be interesting to see that. You know, to be honest, the winner of that is likely to be whoever uses the least resources facing Gondor. You can see here the Sentinels charging into this Harlinden Guard, taking away another chunk of Linden's skirmish power. Well, what's going on over here? More Harlinden infantry, more Black Swan renegades, really putting the screws to Gondor. There's only so many guardsmen of the Citadel left. Only 67 of them there, which is not going to hold the line for too much longer. There's some Gondor archers over here as well. The veterans of Osgiliath. Desperate times, they have been committed to melee. And over here, actually, to be fair, Gondor have held the line pretty well. There's some Eastron warriors coming in here, but they are ill-equipped to deal with the higher quality Gondorians that are being thrown at them. But there's also some Muhard Beast Hunts coming over here, and actually we can have a bit of a three-way fight going on over here. The Black Swan Renegades, the Gondor Infantry, and the Muhard Beast Hunters all tearing chunks out of one another. The Dole Amroth forces, however, are the ones with the highest quality on this front, and they are also receiving some support from their Dor and Ernil archers off in their territory. Demons of the Desert still firing, meanwhile. Hard to miss these lads. The Mumakil are slowly but surely sort of inching their way forwards, using their missiles, but not engaging in melee just yet. And now with the support of the runic units on the front line as well, this armour piercing is likely to be the final nail in the Gondorian coffin. We'll go back up to 1 speed actually now. See the Gamprim, another classic unit from Vanilla. The spine of the runic force with the Loka units. The Flagrin moving forth as well. Backed up by the Eastron warriors, a little bit more expendable perhaps, as the Baltroth tribesmen starting to move into position as well with their javelins.
The enemy badly. They have only half their men left.
Very chaotic fight thus far, as the 4 Linden long spears are starting to move forward as well, so Linden pikes. There's no rest for the weary from a Gondorian perspective, but we'll see how many kills he got by the end. See whether or not he can claim a moral victory or not, but this is when the collapse is going to happen, I think, because we can see the Knights of the Silver Swan charging into the back lines. There was also the Linden Lancers back here as well. Bit of an awkward charge up and over the hill, but at this point there's also the Linden forces just sort of swarming over the hill that Gondor used to occupy. And this might actually work out in favour of Dole Amroth and Linden as well, because if they work quickly they can occupy the hill and the higher ground before Harad and Rune can. Which, you know, that could be a pretty substantial factor in the fight as it happens. The Nimlothian Honour Guard are moving into position, which, again, Gondor still has a part to play here. Because if they can sort of whittle away, particularly at the Linden and Dole Amroth cavalry. Dole Amroth with that melee cav here, however, the Carmel's Dragon Knights. Mithrandir's Retainer bodyguard, which we missed actually, so that's the Gandalf's Retinue bodyguard, which are going to run off, but they are, of course, multiple HP Lancers. Chased away by Rune and Harad. There's also the Dole Amroth cavalry, which is on the run from the Haradrim horde. The Hashari Shadows backed up by the Mumakil, and Dole Amroth want none of that, for good reason, and they're actually taking a fairly hefty chunk of damage. 2 units of their Horse Guard, which strong melee cav as well. But the amount of damage the Mumakil can do in a short time frame is certainly not to be taken lightly. The Runic cavalry swarming forward, so occupying the hill is going to look a little bit dicey actually for Linden and Dole Amroth, with all of this sort of cavalry pressure that they're going to be receiving. Nimlothian Honour Guard on the front line as well, trying to hold back this horde of Linden elves. What's going on this side as well? So, you know, Gondor, some of their units still fighting to the death, but their infantry line is largely gone at this point. These Black Swan Renegades have chased Gondorian units too far, however, and they are now going to be utterly overwhelmed by the Runic and Haradrim infantry. There's still all of those skirmishers a little bit further back as well. Still plenty of fight left in this, although not a lot of frames left actually, so you would imagine actually that things are going to go pretty quickly. The Horse Guard are charging in here, the Lancers trying to pursue the Dragon's Wrath Warlords, and overall the Dragon's Wrath Warlords are a little bit too slow to get away. But the Eastron Clan Chiefs are now over here as well, so some Spear Cavalry being added to the mix. The Mumakil just sort of hoving into view over the hill over there. The Carmel's Dragon Knights might be able to sandwich the Peridil Horse Guard between themselves and the Warlords. And with the Mumakil in close proximity, you would imagine that this is actually going to be pretty dicey for the Dole Amroth cavalry. And if they lose all of this cav, that's bad tidings for them. I mean, this is some Swan Knights over here as well, some standard Swan Knights, which I missed earlier on. Obviously, they are very strong melee cav themselves. The Serpent Guard don't really want to get involved with this mass of Dole Amroth Knights. But yeah, here come the Mumakil just carving their way through the Horse Guard. So it's definitely a very interesting back and forth between the two sets of cavalry over here, but you know, the sort of micro-engagements that have been happening have gone in favour of Rune and Harad so far. The Dole Amroth Knights need to be really careful because they could get overwhelmed here. The Swan Knights are a good melee cav unit, but they're going up against Knights and Mumakil. The Haven Knights also are here as well, though, the Hashari Shadows. There goes one of the Mumakil. The Lancers are coming in as well, javelins flying all over the place. The Forlinder Marines trying to support their units. More cavalry charging across the hill. Going to get a nice charge here into the Forlinder Marines, you would imagine. Bit of a slow one, though. They don't want to stick around too long either in melee with those spears. Archers, ammunition flying all over the place. Enough with that cavalry engagement, though. Let's get back to the infantry, as Rune actually did occupy the highest ground. Well, there goes the Gondorian general at long last. He's still technically in the fight, Creed. Can he mount the best comeback ever? Possibly not. The flag room, their AP won't help them too much against Linden. The pikes are a little bit all over the place, though, so maybe that will work out in their favour as the cavalry engagements continue. What's happening with the Mumakil? Well, the Mumakil are still alive at the very least, and they are not running amok either. They also have the support of the nearby Serpent Guard and the Carmel's Dragon Knights, which, with all of this, they should be able to overwhelm the Haven Knights. Serpent Guard are also charging in. Yeah, and I think really the piecemeal engagements here, Dole Amroth really needed to bunch all of their cavalry up, Dole Amroth and Linden at that, because Rune and Harad sort of combined all of their might and sort of individually overwhelmed the Dole Amroth units. And Dole Amroth's melee cav is very strong, so they should really have had more of a fight in them than that. Like the Mumakil, especially with the javelins in support, the Mumakil shouldn't have really had such a huge impact on this fight, you would have imagined. The Black Serpents are over here though as well, so multiple HP Lancers. Fire ammunition is now being poured into the Mumakil to try and make them run amok, but at this point the archers are quite short of support over here, and they are going to be charged into oblivion by all of these Harad Lancers. There are some Harland infantry over here as well. Might be time to try and reorganise. Meanwhile, there is these fights going on over here as well. You can see the Knights of the Silver Swan doing well for themselves. Well, we had to see that little cutscene of the runic general falling. The Eastron clan chiefs are over here to try and support all of these units, which would otherwise be in a pretty nasty position against the Knights of the Silver Swan. Spear cavalry. There's also the Eastron Guard, which have an anti-cavalry bonus of their own. Still some Dore and Ernil archers out wide, but this is a pretty mad fight. You can see the Mumakil just sort of running over the hill. There's a lot of wavering actually from Rune. There's also breaking from Linden. Elven morale is extremely high, but when your lines are being crushed by Mumakil, that is one of the things which can send even the elves into a panic. As Rune continue to push forward, Harad, obviously they still have the numbers to do this. As we look back over the hill, the Horse Lords are now over here, the Linden Knights, which again they should have been getting stuck in with the Dole Amroth cavalry earlier. They could still help to turn this fight around though. Eastron clan chiefs getting another charge. Getting some more kills on the 4 Linden archers, but at what cost? Because they are almost certainly going to be destroyed now by the Linden Knights. Harland infantry pushing forward, the Mumakil still not running amok. Fire arrows doing their best, but and now you can see more runic forces pushing forward. Baltroth Tribesmen and Loknar Rim, however, so scraping the barrel in terms of the infantry units. But now we can see the Muhad War Beasts coming forward. I'll be interested to see what they can accomplish. With their mass, you would imagine they should be able to smash right through the dwindling lines that both Linden and Dole Amroth are putting up here. Dole Amroth, actually, their infantry is looking very sparse. I haven't actually seen any of the Athlon halberdiers in melee, which probably indicates how well they've managed to hold up over the course of the fight. Not anything against them, of course, but it looks as though Dole Amroth has had their work cut out for them over here. They simply haven't had the resources to spare over here. They, of course, spent a lot on their cavalry, which was engaged with the cavalry of the Easterlings and the Southrons. That is, unless... What's going on over here? Ah, here we go. This is why I haven't seen the halberds or the man-at-arms. They were a flanking force, which is now coming over here, dealing with these routing Muhad Beastmasters. So this is something else, actually, which both Rune and Harad are going to have to take note of. as the Dole Amroth men-at-arms and halberdiers start moving forwards, because this is still not an insubstantial force, and with those halberds they can't just rely on cavalry charging them. Knights of the Silver Swan being hounded by all of these spear cavalry, trying to get away, but heavy knights, not quite as swift as something like the more lightly armoured Linden cavalry. Gampering and wavering, actually. Harland infantry feeling good about their chances, probably a little bit less so now that the Muhad Warbeasts are colliding with their backlines, stopping the Mithlond Marines from firing at that. Those javelins can't have been having a good effect on Rune or Harad, and that is a big rout. That was a charge at just the right time there by Sin and his mutant rhinos. The Black Serpents charging right through, bisecting this unit of 4 Linden archers. Trying to get away, by the looks of things, from the Horse Lords of Ulmo. What is going on over there? And here we can see the Dole Amroth bow cavalry has also revealed itself. Perhaps a significant addition here in the late game. 2 units of these, when there are very limited skirmish options in the late game, this is exactly the sort of thing which can lead to victory. Still more javelins being thrown by the 4 Linden Marines. There's also that flanking force of Dole Amroth infantry to worry about. So now Dole Amroth slowly but surely surrounding the Harad and Runic forces, who were occupying the hill that Gondor once occupied. Those Muhad Warbeasts charging into the Athelon men-at-arms, doing a lot of damage to them as well, actually causing them to become shaken. Getting out of there quickly though, before the halberdiers can start laying down their anti-cavalry damage. Some very battered units of Flag Grim. Fire arrows coming in here as well, into the Eastron Guard, who are of course unshielded, so this is unlikely to go too well for them. Trying to go after the Horse Lords of Ulmo, who, to be fair, have taken some losses over the course of this fight. The Eastron clan chiefs should probably try and sandwich them between them and the Spear Cav. They need to do something to deal with them. Interestingly enough, Gondor still alive, and actually with a pretty substantial unit as well. Multiple HP Lancers, which here in the late game, who knows? Gondor might be able to pull this out. It's doubtful, but they could. These Mithlond Marines who are still throwing their javelins even though the Eastron Guard are right up in their faces. The Peradil Randira still firing some of their arrows. The Loke Flag Grim fighting to the death. The Harlinden Guard are here. The 4 Linden Long Spears have definitely done their job, helping to hold down this front line. And it looks like give victory to Dole Amroth and Linden on the hill, now with the support from the Dole Amroth infantry that came around from the flank. I'm thinking that the Harad and Runic armies don't have too much left in them, especially not when there are still some cavalry units running around to sort of pick off the stragglers. So it's looking as though Linden and Dole Amroth will carry the day. The Muhad Warbeasts are also running amok, so that's not good. They needed them to charge in and do some damage. The Peradil Randirim are in melee now with the Mithrandir's bodyguard, which probably not going to go too well for the Dole Amroth bow cavalry, to be honest with you.
Our men are running like cowards.
Well, there goes Rune. Rune are gone. Do Harad have anything left? I'm not really sure. It's hard to tell in and amongst all these trees and Mumakil corpses. There's still fighting happening around here. But the 4 Linden Longspears definitely proving their worth on the front line in a big way here. 4 Linden Archers doing very well. So it's fair to say that, Harad and Rune went in heavy on the Gondorian front line, and Gondor, as a result, committed more resources over there than they did against Dole Amroth and Linden. I think that's ultimately what won them the fight. I think, just in general, Dole Amroth and Linden came out of the initial engagement with Gondor just a little bit better, and they also marshalled their resources very well. I feel as though keeping those horse archers in reserve till the late game, and then sort of surrounding the Runic and Harad position with the horse archers on this flank, some flanking infantry over here made up of the sort of basic men-at-arms and the halberds was also another good move. And just in general, Linden's infantry on the front line, performed really very, very well to sort of hold down the fort in the middle. That was a projectile from the Demons of the Desert, I would hazard to guess. There's only 2 of them left, mind you. Peradil Randirim going after the Mithrandir's bodyguard. There isn't very many of them left. Where are those demons? Here we go. Demons of the desert, only 2 of them. But they've been spotted, and they are now going to be taking ranged fire from pretty much every angle. Oof, right in the back of the leg. Well, there is no retreat. Harad, you know, it's cold here. Harad, you know, don't do very well in the cold. And Rune as well. Both are desert dwellers. And that's going to be Gondor gone. So I'd imagine that's just going to leave Harad. So technically speaking, you know, Gondor were the first team to fall. Harad just about managing to hold on. Rune were the first army to be utterly vanquished. There goes Sin's general. Part of the Black Serpents, being hounded by the Knights of the Silver Swan. And in the end, I do feel as though Rune and Harad's cavalry forces did a pretty decent job, considering they were up against a very strong Dole Amroth cavalry contingent from a melee perspective, and also Linden, who just in general have got a very good melee cavalry force of their own, or at least can deal with that sort of fight very easily. Obviously Gondor drew the short straw here, marooned as they were. The most kills achieved by Linden. Again, not too surprising perhaps. Gondor doing quite well for themselves. Dole Amroth getting the least, but then Dole Amroth also committed a lot of their forces to sort of go on a lengthy flanking manoeuvre. So that can be explained away a little bit by that. Rune with the biggest army, with a lot of their sort of basic Eastron units, and let's actually see what did the damage for J Monster's army. So the Dragon Knights obviously performing quite well. You know, they were right in the thick of things with regards to that Cav fight. The Eastron clan chiefs, 1 unit of them anyway, did quite well. The other one was going up against stuff like Horse Lords of Ulmo, which not likely to go in their favour. Obviously the Flagrim and the Gamprim, for the most part, you know, doing very well. You know, a lot of their good performances would have been initially against Gondor. As they started fighting against Linden, you know, would have been less effective in general. Just obviously the AP not going to be as useful there. The Baltroth Tribesmen could have done maybe a little bit better, but you know, it's a decent return considering they're not as expensive as some other javelins. So yeah, that is the first full-length battle that I've shown on 0.97, and it was very good. In general, I think it looks a bit nicer as well. Obviously, the units have been touched up a little bit, which is good to see. I like the map as well. That bodes well. Sort of new maps is always a good thing. And just sort of more variety is the lifeblood of the mod. You know, I think just getting more in there. And yeah, big thanks to J Monster to sending this for me. I look forward to seeing more of 0.97 and actually playing some of 0.97 now that my university term has finished. Hopefully I can actually be in some of my own battles. I haven't played a battle myself in like 3 months at this point, so surely I will suck. The road to getting good is going to be lying before me once more, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for more of 0.97 coming up soon.